episode 9.
Hello and welcome to Slash Dupe, the movie pitching podcast with a twist. Everybody gets the same title, some time to prepare, and then brings their idea to the table. One of us hasn't had the title in advance, however, and that is our dupe, Ryan. Ryan, how are you feeling today?
Yeah, really, really good. Done away with the rhymes after so much hate from them, so I'm just going to do with a normal intro. Hi, I'm Ryan. Nice to meet you all. Love being the dupe.
I was
Can't wait
hoping
for the
there'd be
title.
like a secret rhyme in there.
Nah.
Okay, all right. An old bait and switch.
I'm an impressionable young man, so as soon as two people have said that they hate it, I'm out. That's it.
Listen,
I'm
you
done.
might get some love on the comments or whatever. You never know.
See what the ratio is.
It's unlikely, but you never know. So of our other two guests, we've got Dan. Both our other guests have the title today. How do you feel about the title, Dan?
I'm really excited for the title.
I'm excited. You haven't given anything away, but you seem more excited than usual. So I'm
Only because it's a banger of an idea. Honestly,
okay.
It's not much. it's a tiny seed
Okay,
from small acorns.
that's why you've elected to go second, because you don't want to show
Correct.
Ollie up, do you?
Ooh, more like I don't want our listeners to turn off. That's
Okay, I see. The other person you can hear is Ollie. Ollie's our guest today. Ollie, how long ago did you get the title?
As the centuries ago that was pre-coronavirus.
Yeah.
I would say most of the thought went into this in the day or two before we cancelled the last podcast.
Yeah.
And I picked it up a little bit, but for the most part, it's still pretty much preserved from that time.
Uh-huh. Well, you've probably got me beat because I came up with mine whilst when I told you a minute ago, I'll be 5 minutes late. That was why. So my idea was made about 10 minutes ago.
And actually, something for the guests here. So Ollie was actually due to be on the podcast right before the UK went into lockdown because we were primed, ready to go, and then we just
Yeah,
couldn't
so we're
do
actually
it.
quite grateful that you could connect. We could all connect online. Actually, I'm quite excited. So I'm Sean, your peerless moderator, and at the end of the episode, I'll be picking a winner. But I'll tell you why I'm picking a winner and what happens to it at the halfway point of the podcast. So our title for today is An Honest Woman. So that's the title that we're all operating off of today. It's An Honest Woman. A title that I think has a sort of a few connotations, an interesting sort of genesis and etymology to the phrase. And perhaps a sort of something perhaps contentious or perhaps not, depending on where when the movie's set. So I'm quite excited to see what you guys have come up with for this title. So Ollie, I think you're the first doctor. You're a Dr. Elliot, aren't you? I think you're the first doctor that we've had on the podcast. Is that right?
Okay, yeah, you're setting me up here. I guess so.
I'm just trying to. I don't have any follow-up, any sort of like pithy radio host follow-up. I'm just saying that I'm just trying to elevate the status of the podcast in other people's minds, before I crush it at the end with my idea. Do you think that's given you? Do you think that's given you a leg up? Do you think has it aided in any way?
So I'm going to immediately give away a little bit of what my idea is and say it's historically orientated.
Okay.
Although probably not in a meaningful academic way, as I would usually look at these things. It's more for the feel of the period that I wanted. So that may have done it, but it's also got nothing to do with what I study.
Right. So okay, Ollie, go ahead. Give us your idea for An Honest Woman.
Okay, well, so my idea is an allegorical fantasy drama, if that's a genre. It is now. It is now, if it wasn't before. You heard it here first. It's set in 14th century Europe. And it is actually going to be based on a European folk story about a woman called Melusine. I don't know if anyone here has ever heard of this traditional folk story. Okay, so basically, what I want is a combination somewhere between Darren Aronofsky, who's one of my favorite directors, and Guillermo del Toro. And so the kind of films that I was thinking about when I was coming up with this concept were Mother,
Mhm.
which was Darren Aronofsky's most recent film, and Crimson Peak, which is Guillermo del Toro's most recent film, I think. No, one of his most recent. And that's the kind of feel I want. So something that's kind of gothic, has that kind of luxuriousness of a Guillermo del Toro film, but at the same time has a kind of intense psychological and somewhat macabre feel of something from Darren Aronofsky. So that's those are the stylistic things to think about as I develop my outline.
Sure.
In terms of what I've done here is I've created what I guess would be the whole of the script, the whole of the plot. But I think maybe it's best if I just start by explaining very roughly at the beginning what I want, and then maybe you can suggest directions I could go in.
It's a great idea. Yeah. Please go ahead.
And see if it compares to what I have already had developed in my mind.
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah.
What I've got here is the first scene of the film. This first part of the film, it begins with a young nobleman and two friends sneaking through the guarded town walls of a small medieval town, and they escape capture. They avoid the guards and enter into the town on feast day, where there's a huge party going on in the street. And he spies. The lead guy, the nobleman, spies two women in the river and decides to join them. They start to frolic in the water. They're having a great time, but suddenly he falls deep into the water and gets dragged away by the strong currents down the river towards a dangerous-looking weir or place. I haven't exactly decided, where it looks like if you went there, you're probably not long to live. So people start to congregate to watch. There's chaos. No one has any idea what to do. And then suddenly something happens out of shot, and one of the young women appears on the side of the river, pulling him up out of the water. They embrace, and he asks who she is, and she says, "My name is Melusine." Now, we then fast forward through a whirlwind romance as he introduces her to his family back in the castle. They fall in love. She proposes marriage to him. He proposes marriage to her. She accepts, but with one condition. Every Saturday, she must bathe alone, and he must promise to never even attempt to approach her at this time.
Okay.
And so that's the setup of the story.
Interesting.
So far. Now, I don't know. Maybe I can provide a very rough idea of where I want to go with this, and then
that'd be great. I love it because it has that sort of romantic first section. Because I actually watched Crimson Peak again a couple of weeks ago, and it does have a sort of very classical sort of romantic start, doesn't it? And it's sort of and all of the things that come out in the sort of second and third acts are actually seeded in the first act, even though it seems more like an entrepreneur and business and a romantic sort of entanglement. So I like that I like that it pushes that at the start. It's sort of, are you going to sort of market it and have it so that it makes you believe it's a romance, or is it going to be marketed so that you think it's going to be more of a mainline sort of thriller or?
Well, so this is my next idea from this point, is that I want to then switch the perspective. So we set it up as if it's going to be a romantic film where it's about the guy and the girl, and they're going to have a life where she's hiding something secret and he's going to eventually discover it. And that is kind of what I want, but I want to do it in a different way, where it's not just, they're not actually the main characters. So what I want to do is switch the perspective at the next in the next scene to the nobleman's sister, who's another character taken from his folk story, she's called Presine, and she will be the main character for the rest of the film. So the entire film will be then shown from her perspective. And what I want to show from her view is she's basically like a conspiracy theorist. She's very paranoid.
Right.
She believes that the kingdom is under assault from all kinds of dark forces, and so she's in the castle constantly investigating, discovering, trying to work out what's going on, why the kingdom is, or whatever. We're never sure if she's truly crazy, or if she is in
Sure.
fact the only one who's like seeing the threats for what they are.
Yeah, sure.
And so that's how the whole film is built around this kind of uncertainty as to what extent is she just a conspiracy theorist, or is the conspiracy she's seeing real? And so the part of the film that comes next would be her investigating what happened, and she discovers that what happened to her brother was miraculous. It was impossible for a human being to have done that, to rescue her brother. And so she goes further and further into this conspiracy theory of thinking, what is going on? Who is this woman? How did she manage to save her? And how to save him? And in the end, she manages to somehow discover that. She gets very suspicious of Melusine, and she is kind of going around the castle trying to work out who Melusine is. And eventually, she discovers that Melusine is secreted away in a part of the castle every Saturday, and no one is allowed to go to that part of the castle.
Right.
And so she manages to break herself in to that castle, where she discovers, she overhears like really inhuman noises and a bizarre language being spoken. But you can't see what's going on, so you only hear it. You only hear this kind of really freaky stuff that's going on behind the door. And so the rest of it is then her. The rest of this part of the film would be her trying to uncover what's going on.
Sure.
With the ultimate reveal at some point being that Mesulin is basically some kind of, every Saturday she has to become, or she turns to her true form, which is like an aquatic serpent, which is based on the original folk story. So every Saturday she becomes an aquatic serpent.
Right.
And she has to hide this from the man she loves.
Yeah, sure.
And there's a whole, in the folk story, it's because she's the child of a man and a fairy, and this apparently in folklore it gives rise to someone who has like this werewolf-like tendency to just take a different form every once a week.
To be fair, I think we can all relate to that after a heavy fight.
Yeah, definitely.
And so basically throughout the whole story, I really want Prescient to be this one who's investigating, trying to discover what's going on.
Sure.
She is paranoid, and while her brother is believing that this Mezzalene is completely, he knows that she disappears every Saturday, but he doesn't want to know the truth. He's trying to ignore the truth.
I see.
He's just trying to keep away from it. And Presleen becomes convinced that this woman Mezzalene is dangerous, and she's a demon, and she's going to take over the castle, kill him or something. And so the whole film becomes like a battle between, well, not a battle, but like Presleen trying to push this desire to know the truth against Mezzalene, who actually at the end, what I really want is for Mezzalene to be never a bad person, but someone who's just trying to, she's told the husband that she can never see him on that Saturday, and she did that for his own good and for their own good as a relationship.
Sure.
So she told as much of the truth as she could, but no more, and so she can't tell him who she really is. And so that's the main idea.
I love it. What does he think, the husband? Does he have an inkling? Is he denying the truth as in I don't want to know, or is he honouring her by not minding whatever occurs on the Thursday? Because that's interesting as a character point to me. Which of those does he fall into?
I would say I want him to be quite a positive person. He's not paranoid. He's not fearful. He went into this relationship knowing there was this deal where he would never ask a question about what was going on every Saturday. He'd just say, yep, I love you. I don't care. Whatever it is, it's none of my business. And so it's his sister who's constantly trying to drag out the truth.
And I like that a lot, actually, because it's very often the cliche that the partner who enters into this sort of agreement then sort of reneges on it and decides, oh no, I'm now I can't handle it. But of course, that's So I actually quite like that he's got quite a moral center, but of course it's too much for his family member to deal with, which is almost which is something we can all relate to in a way, isn't it? Like when our brothers and sisters or family members get partners, there's sometimes the friction and sometimes there isn't. So it's like,
Yeah, and you sort of look out for a sibling or a friend even, or I think we've all sort of been in the cases where there's something that maybe we've seen in another relationship and we've said, hey man, can we chat about this
you
or
sort of
whatever?
step in.
Yeah, and it may not be your place, but that's because that's your perspective on one dimension of that sort of that relationship or that diamond.
But then when does it cross over into zealotry or almost like a sort of selfishness, like sort of your willingness to because obviously in the film Precien is sort of like it's her own sort of agenda she's pushing more than worrying for her brother. I don't know.
Yeah. So what's her background? Why is she so hell bent on discovering this rather than letting her brother have his happiness? There must be some reason she thinks she has to go one step further.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I hadn't thought about the background of her character other than just imagining her as very paranoid. One of the things I was thinking about, and again, it's drawn from the folk story, is that there is a sort of there is a historical conflict between the fairy society and humankind, and every so often there is stories of fairies attacking people, and so I was wondering if that could be worked into her backstory of like she witnessed something like that, or there's something in the family history where she thinks, oh, this happened before. Maybe there was a fairy marriage or something like that. She's convinced herself that there was like a previous example of this, and this relationship is them coming back to get revenge for what happened the last time.
I see.
I have a question on this. So, but everything you're describing, with it being the folklore, with it being the sort of the coming from that tale, is that part of it true? Because I know at the beginning you mentioned Del Toro as well. So are you actually saying that this woman becomes, she actually is this fairy thing, or is the sister wanting to believe it so much? Is she that much of a conspiracy theorist? Like, I remember there's like a lot of these like old wives' tales and these sort of mythical stories that we hear, come from like, I remember there's that one, they're like the huge wolf, is it like Black Shuck that the Darkness sang a song about, and there's a church in England with this huge gouge marks on the door, and people have made that into a story tale. Now that's probably, it could have been just a big wolf, right?
Yeah.
But we've made it into this thing. So is that what the sister's trying to do? Is she trying to create? Because she's trying to prove to everybody
and if
that
she
the
is,
conspiracy
why
is true.
Why would she be trying to divine this? I guess it was based on what you were saying, about her fearing this reprisal from the sort of fairy world. But so you're saying she is.
What if it is? The fairies do exist. This woman is a fairy, but all the way through, she's made out to be this paranoid person that's making stuff up. And but the person that's like egging her on in a Titania Oberon kind of way is another fairy winding her up, telling her that these things are real.
Like a Puck from Midsummer's Night's Dream.
But what happens if she isn't one, but there are actually fairies? But it's not the wife that's the one affected by fairies. It's the sister that is affected by fairies. And they're giving her hallucinations.
Double cross.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm throwing it out there.
Yeah, I could see potential for that. Though it creates some interesting relational dynamics if the brother is not a fairy and the sister's a fairy.
Oh, I don't even know if she is a fairy. It's just some fairies are talking to her to wind her up.
I see. Okay,
and it
so
could
like
be
they're working through her.
His wife is a fairy offspring, and so they're trying to get her found out because it's the other court or the husband of the wife that had the affair and created the wife who is a half serpent.
Maybe they are the bad fairies. They are the fairies that she is frightened of, but they are masquerading as sort of either ordinary people or the fairies that she's not frightened of. But really, and they're sort of twisting that this innocent creature or this ordinary person is what they're telling her that it's something that it's not. Yeah, interesting. It's what's interesting about this for me is that with conspiracy theories, they're very hard line. I think when you look at films set around the 13th, 14th century, they're either definitely some mysticism and fantasy, or there definitely isn't. And so I find it interesting to take the fairly modern idea of a conspiracy theorist and apply it to that period of time. And sort of, you have changing religions, don't you? You have different countries that have religions enforced upon them between the 12th and 14th century as well. And so you go from believing one thing organizes the world to believing that something else organizes the world. So you do have this sort of plausible sort of, I don't know, schism in reality for these people. So it is plausible that she could be correct or she could be mad. And I think that that's quite a cool way of, I don't know if I was making it, whether I would feel confident of actually showing her as one of these creatures. Would you? Is that definitely part of what you like about the idea? Is that no, she's at the end of it, you show her,
I think that's one of the toughest decisions to make, because I think there's a risk of anticlimax where if you really resolve nothing, the audience will go to the end and say, well, it's just not satisfying. Like that ambiguity sustained for too long. I think it needs to have some, you need to do something with that ambiguity and make a point with it if you're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. The ending I had in my head was that it would end up in a situation where everybody, it's kind of like Crimson Peak, where it all gets so extreme that you kind of lose track of what's real and what's not. And also like Mother in some ways. So it just everyone kind of goes so unhinged that you don't know if you're watching reality or it's broken down into some kind of pure allegorical insanity.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But I think in general, I would like to show something to kind of hint at towards the end. Obviously, keep it until as late as you can of what she may look like, and give these hints. Never fully visible, but kind of give some sense of kind of what her serpent form would be like.
Sure.
And the sense that she is from some very, very strange, at least. And that's the thing. Maybe she's not a fairy, or she's not a weird creature or monster, but there's something very different about her, and she is not she's not like everybody else. And so that's the thing. You can make it metaphorical. It's like she's clearly, as you say, like there are lots of religious groups, like various sects and religious cults in that time who were doing things that, for the rest of society standards, were considered to be completely blasphemous or monstrous. And so you can fill the film with references to those kinds of things as well.
Is the sister religious? Is she heavily religious?
I hadn't thought about her as a religious person. Okay. I kind of actually thought of her almost like a scientist.
Okay.
Because that's what intrigues me as well, is that she's actually the one that's asking questions. She is the one that is doing this research and trying to find out what's going on, while everyone else around her is just saying, no, it's fine. We don't need to know what's going on.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. That's it for me, like in terms of her character. Like, I get it now. Like, totally, yeah.
She's being heralded as a conspiracy theorist, but actually she's a scientist trying to collect facts. But in the collecting of facts, it breaks away from the norm. And so because it's breaking away from the norm, people are like, well, what are you doing? Why are you trying to get this information? Just stop being so crazy.
Just believe in these things we're telling you to believe in. Absolutely. Yeah. And also, sorry, go on, Ollie.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that there's a link to this, which is about something specifically I've read about in Spain, where we all know the Spanish Inquisition. Was actually in Spain. The Spanish Inquisition was the force.
It's just called the Inquisition, isn't it?
The Inquisition.
Sorry. Carry on.
It's an oldie, but it's a goodie. That joke. But the Spanish Inquisition was the force that ended witchcraft persecution in Spain.
Right.
And that was because they were the first group to ever go actually properly investigate cases of witchcraft and apply analysis to the study of whether someone was truly a witch or not. Because they considered themselves to be like a judicial system that actually weighed evidence.
Right.
And so in the end, they sent lots of people around the country and discovered there was no witchcraft, because they actually applied logic and analysis to the study of it. So I think that is something that may tie into this, is that actually a religious person who is really, really kind of sure of their faith is not going to be engaged in extremism like this, because they don't need to create imaginary monsters. They will do the proper research and check what is true. They actually will believe, they will look for the truth.
And that brings me to my next question, where we're setting it. And in terms of language, which language will we be using?
I imagined it as a sort of ambiguous European, Central European location. So it wouldn't take from any one national cultural perspective. It would be probably a mixing of different, because it's a European cultural tale as far as I understand. Like it's in England, it's in France, it's in Germany. And so I like the idea of fusing it.
But with Del Toro on board, is it a Spanish indie kind of film? Do you know what I mean? Like
it could be.
Just what it feels
is it just
like.
me that hasn't seen enough? I haven't seen enough films in that sort of medieval period. If it is the medieval period, I'm just using that as a generic, like Jurassic period. I'm just using medieval as a generic term. It may be, several hundred years prior. But I haven't seen a lot of Spanish language films or films set in Spain during that period of time. I don't know perhaps why. I mean, you see a lot of French and a lot of British films in that time period. But yeah, and perhaps it's just me. But yeah, making it Spanish language, setting it in and around some of the areas of Spain could lend itself to just a bit more uniqueness, I think, maybe in the landscape.
Where's the folklore from?
It's part of almost all European traditions, as far as I understand. And it does have an interesting connection, I think, to the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice.
Right.
Like this
Don't look back.
ancient Greek ideal. Yeah, don't look back. Because in the end, in almost all forms of the fairy tale, he does look at her and she has to escape. She has to leave. And that's it. That's the end of he destroys the relationship through his lack of faith in her.
So what happens then in this one when it's her that destroys it? That's fascinating to me. Then what happens to their relationship between the two of them if it's not him that betrayed her trust? What would then happen in that moment? That moment in the great myths that say, right, now you've ruined everything. What then happens at the point where she discovers, where Pressienne discovers Melusine's secret? Would that alter the tale how would that alter the tale?
I had not thought about whether Pressienne would be the one to see her as such and to reveal her. Right. But that would make more sense, I think, in some ways. Because I want this story really to be about the relationship between the women. Sure. I think, given the title, given what we're looking at, I want the kind of the beginning to lull you into the sense, it's going to be a romantic film. And then in the end, the guy kind of just disappears. Fades from
I like
perspective.
That. Yeah, definitely.
Does finding the knowledge drive her mad? Does the touch with the fairy world isn't... And why the wife is trying to keep her husband away from that is that to see that site, like Cthulhu, that kind of stuff, to see those gods would actually drive you mad. And so she gets this glimpse and ends up going mad, which then proves everyone right, that she was a conspiracy theorist and now she's gone mad. But she's gone mad because her conspiracy was right. And the husband never gets to find out and actually stays honest and true. And then he never goes mad either, because he never comes in contact with the fairy world.
Yes, I really like the idea.
Good. Good. Because it is very multifaceted, isn't it? And it's one of these ideas that lends itself it's so beautifully sort of open-ended, and you can tackle such a lot of themes with it. So it is difficult to pin down sort of where exactly you want it to go. because because I'm getting shades of the Babadook as well, where because it's something physical that you do see that is there, but of course afterwards it is an allegory. It is something else. But whilst also still being this physical beast that you see, which I think is quite. I might edit some of that just for spoilers. I don't want to like. But no, you do see the Babadook, don't you? And it's not really a. It is a thing, but then it also represents something else. So yeah, so I think there you can have your cake and eat it by showing something, but having as in her form and the effects of that, but then also having it mean something and having it say something deeper.
Oh, I'm gonna throw a curveball into this,
Go on.
right? So based on what you were saying, Dan, in Birdman, the Edward Norton film, no, the film that has Edward Norton.
It's not the Edward
Not
Norton
Edward
film,
Norton
but
film,
yeah,
but
I'm not sure anyone would describe it as the Edward Norton.
I'm gonna
film.
start that again. Oh,
No, that we're keeping in.
I'm gonna throw a curveball at this. So in Birdman,
The
when
Michael Keaton film.
the Michael Keaton film.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. When he actually sort of sees Birdman, doesn't he? But he's the only one that sees it because it's talking to him in his head, and you sort of see it flying around and that. And there's all those scenes. So is that maybe actually what the sister's seeing? She's creating all of this in her head, creating the conspiracy theories, but trying to apply science to it, but it's actually not real. I've confused myself. Yeah. But that sort of thing where it's like, yeah, so it's like the idea of if what Dan was saying, if she's seeing the sort of Cthulhu and going crazy, then she's right, but the conspiracy theorists are right.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
I think that would be.
And how's she seen by others, Ollie? Is she seen as someone who is outside of the norm that you need to sort of keep at arm's length, or does she allow her sort of her nature of being a scientist, her nature of being different and questioning? Does she allow that out for people to see? Is she bold with it, like Belle dancing through the street talking about books in Beauty and the Beast, or is she holding back? Is she a quiet, sort of subtle soul who's sort of more solitary with it?
No, I would see her as aggressive and confrontational, and someone who is, I mean, she's like a hard-bitten cop who is desperate to get to the bottom of the story, like what's going on. And her relentlessness allows her to enter the parts of the castle. She's very cunning. She can trick people. She's used to doing anything it takes to get to the bottom of these conspiracies. And again, I would like to think that precociousness, again, is about women characters in that era, makes her extremely unusual. And it's a film about her as a very a woman who would not normally be able to function in that society because no one would respect her for that kind of behavior. They would say you're not performing your normal role. But maybe because of her social status, the fact she's the brother of this sister of this nobleman, she's found a space where she can behave in ways that no one else would ever allow her to. But also maybe there's an interesting element there of, if you are like that, you are so engaged and kind of fervent in your ideas, but no one listens to you. She's largely ignored by everybody else. It is the thing that drives her insane. Like you are the only intelligent person in a society which completely has no interest in your intelligence. That is the process through which we watch her unravel mentally. Even though she's right, even though she's getting to the bottom of this story, that she's discovered the truth. The truth destroys her, I suppose, is the way that you could have this.
Okay, thanks for that, Ollie. Next we have Dan. Dan, I'm looking forward to your idea for an honest woman.
Brilliant. I'm glad you are. It is a one-line pitch.
When is it any different?
You're going to love it. Hey, sometimes it's
two lines.
This is an honest woman, a docu-film, possible docu-series, the Carole Baskin rebuttal.
Okay.
So I just want to start this by saying I'm fully going to get slapped for this. I still haven't watched Tiger King yet.
I mean,
well, you don't need to, because Dan's going to fill you in very briefly about Carole Baskin's role in Tiger King.
Well, I mean, I'd have to unravel the entirety of Tiger King, but if you haven't seen Tiger King, I mean, I don't really know how to describe it. It is the most, and I mean this in the nicest to all my American friends. It is the most American of docuseries that you could ever hope to watch. It's when you first watch it. I first watched it. I got to episode 2 and thought, this has got to be a comedy in the style of Ricky Gervais, in that everyone seems so utterly ridiculous, just pushed to 11.
Sure.
That this can't be real, but it's scarily close. And it turns out everyone is real. And that's more worrying. But it's about big cat.
Sort of private big cat
zoos.
farms, isn't it? Yeah, zoos.
Yeah.
Farms.
And Carole Baskin is a animal rights activist that has a sanctuary for big cats, which ironically is identical to a big cat zoo, but she sells it differently. At least that's the way the documentary makes it come across. Within this documentary, she is vilified by all the other men in the series, and she has a very particular personality. In fact, that's probably the subtitle for it, which will be "An honest woman, hey there, cats and kittens," will be the bit underneath.
Okay.
And she has been accused of murdering her ex-husband, and she has millions upon millions of pounds to bring lawsuits against all these other sort of cat owners. Anyway, my idea is that this is a docu-film, which I think ends up spinning into a docu-series because she can't help herself, about Carole Baskin, funded by Carole Baskin.
That's it. That's the hook I was waiting for. That's it. That's the thing that elevates it, isn't it? Of course it is.
Yeah. And I'm not entirely sure as to whether Carole Baskin plays Carole Baskin.
Interesting.
Or in her hubris, she gets someone else to play her so that there's a level of detachment. But she ends up getting someone like Scarlett Johansson to play her.
She'd like that.
Scarlett Johansson can play anything. She would like that. Everyone would like that.
I think it's one of these news reports that says Margot Robbie and Charlize Theron considered for Carole Baskin. And then it goes to like a B or a C lister instead. So that
you can't get them.
No, but and it's definitely someone whose career is maybe like they're trying to do the edgy thing. They're trying to do the whole makeup and the whole Charlize Theron thing and like, make themselves transform. But it's, B or a C lister instead. I don't know who could fill that role, but
we'll have to have a think about that. And when it gets changed, inevitably after the film has lukewarms at the very best success, she runs it into a docu-series where she plays herself, but all of the other actors are the same. Yeah. Because no one else can really do Carole Baskin like Carole Baskin can do Carole Baskin. Yeah.
I'm gonna say Reese Witherspoon is who's cast in the movie.
I love it.
I feel like that's where she's at in her sort of career, is that this is the one she might do. She's looked fantastic in every film she's ever done. This is the one where she goes, right, I'm gonna try and get my Oscar. And she goes for Carole Baskin.
And I think the way the film plays out is that it's in an attempt to sort of find her innocence, the honesty in the disappearance of the ex-husband, but all it does is raise loads more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also, is it like a shameless promotion for her sort of...
Oh, absolutely. Everything else is like Big Cat Sanctuary, this, Big Cat Sanctuary, that, and like hideous product placement going on all the way through. But massive production quality. I think she sinks loads of money into it. It becomes a vanity project, doesn't it? And it could have gone so right. It probably goes through 3 or 4 writers as well, because they get fired because they don't give it the right level. I don't know how I feel after having watched Tiger King, and it's inevitable it was going to come up in this in our podcast at some point. I don't know how I feel about any of the characters in that, because I don't know how it was produced. So I think the docuseries ends up taking up on, and it is a fake docuseries. It's like it's real, but it's not real because she's creating the world in that.
Very much like a reality TV shows type
A state, like a Made in Chelsea type thing. Yeah.
Dan, can I ask what is your feeling of what motivates her from the documentary and in your show? What is?
Well, that's the hard thing, because within that, it was hard to understand who I liked or didn't like, because I don't think there was anyone for me in that series that was, truly good or truly redeemable out of anyone there, really. They all seemed to be quite, they may have all had the best. It seemed like the perfect villain story for all of them, or they all started off with a good motive, or at least what they could express as a good motive. They had the cats at heart, or they had something at heart, and then it ends up that for almost every single one of them, their own personality gets in the way, along with money, whether for good or for bad, and they end up becoming a caricature of the person they had started, or at least that's how the series made them out to be, which is a far more interesting thing to watch, isn't it, really, than just a bunch of people getting on their day. So I think in this docuseries she's trying to make herself out as the martyr of all of this, but she's also too proud, isn't she, to be a victim, I think.
Sure.
That's something I noticed in the series, is that she is a victim. They're all picking on her, which she likes to tell us they're doing, but she also throws it away, doesn't she? Like, oh, they keep doing this to me. He shoots mannequins with my face on. Oh, they're just all so silly. I think this ends up taking down the more martyrdom sides, that we feel a bit sorry for her. But she's only doing that sort of in a manipulative way, because she's too proud to be a victim.
Yeah.
And again, as the only one, there was not the only woman, but sort of the main woman player in that series, I wouldn't want to be seen as the victim either. Do you know what I mean? That's such
it's a catch-22 for her, really, isn't it? Like the way she's framed and shown.
Catch-22.
22. That's terrible. That's worse than my position joke.
Maybe that's episode 3 of the docu-series is called
Yes, it is, isn't it? Yeah. I also think I want to throw out that I find it. I think maybe maybe the docu-film was made by quite a prominent documentarian for her, but in that it did make her. Maybe it was called the Carole Baskin apology, but apology because it's quite a lofty filmmaker. So apology in the Greek sense, which means in defense of, So it's like a defense of, but she doesn't get that, the subtlety of it. She doesn't like the word apology, and she doesn't like looking like the victim in it, despite it being a sort of defensive film. So then she takes it into her own sort of hands and her own bank account to make this docu-series. Yeah.
Yeah. And as the docu-series goes by, she throws a lot of money at the beginning. So some of the actors that were in the docu-film, they start in the series. But as each episode goes by, at least one of them disappears and is replaced by the actual person. And so it ends up them having to, like in Neighbours or Home and Away or EastEnders, they have to keep saying that person's name so that you know that they've now changed.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it ends up actually the film makes things more complicated. I don't know whether the series, like all of those best sort of American docu-series, like Making a Murderer and Tiger King, and there's one other I was thinking about.
Don't fuck with cats.
Yeah, well, but the one with Making a Murderer and Tiger King is that you come out at the end of them not knowing. Like you have a really strong, like with Making a Murderer, you're like, oh, that's horrible. Like, how dare these people be locked up? But then you're like, oh, I just don't. There's still enough there to go. Who really is? What is going on? I'm almost certain, and obviously it's been filmed to make me think that way too.
Sure.
Like with Tiger King, you're like kind of on Joe's side for. Well, at least I felt I was on Joe's side for at least like one episode where you're like, this guy's crazy, but at least he's trying to do something good, and it slowly unravels. But none of the people that he meets on the way are good to show him up as being the baddie. They're all just baddies. They're all just like mad.
Is it interesting to? I mean, of course, what I like about this the most is that Carole Baskin is doing it herself. But is there something you can play around with the artifice of documentaries and docudramas? Is there something? Is there maybe the documentary crew that shot her for Tiger King? She's also cast and featured them in the film that she's doing, or something, and then perhaps they're also making a documentary while she's doing the
so it's a
docudrama.
documentary of a documentary. I like that. Or maybe it's the docu-film of the docu-series or something.
Yeah. Maybe really I'm adding
meta.
too much to it.
Maybe.
Too many layers.
But maybe, the guy that originally did the Tiger King, the guy with the hat and the low voice and the cigar, whatever his name was, can't remember where he was, who disowned Joe Exotic by the end.
Yeah.
Maybe he's in on it. Maybe he comes in on this. And so there's a whole counter conspiracy that's going on with what is actually being said, what is going on.
And they film their own version of events, and then two competing documentaries are
terrible
released,
reconstructions.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my friends I used to work with, she was in a lot of these reconstructions for TV because the guy she was living with was the person that had to edit and film them, so they're just in their front room blurred out doing stuff. So maybe that's the sort of thing where they actually end up, she's that's not the sort of recall of events, and they make all of these really terrible reconstructions that you can sort of believe because you're seeing it because if you know what the originals are, you're now seeing it from a different perspective, from an honest woman's perspective.
I like it.
I like the fact that she's used the word honest as well in her title. She's doubling down on it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the first title we've had in /Dupe, isn't it? With a colon and a subtitle, is it? I believe.
Yes.
Which I like. I miss those films. I'm glad that there's one in /Dupe. And I think, does she have a new husband as well? Because I sort of like this idea, and he's just sort of. Do you know what I watched? I believe it's called. Is it called Solo? The one about the guy
Free Solo.
The guy who climbs El Cap with a lightsaber. So it's about the guy who climbs El Cap, free climbs it. But during the documentary, he gets a partner, he gets a girlfriend who. I don't want to cast aspersions on her because I don't know anything about her or their relationship, but he seems very, based on some of his brain scans, his personality, he seems very pragmatic, very focused. He doesn't seem as sort of, I don't know, he doesn't discuss on camera love and relationships the same way you would normally hear someone talking about them on camera. And she's very, I think she tracked him down because she knew about his fame, right? She knew about him because of that, which immediately casts some suspicious sort of ideas. And there's just something unusual about the relationship. She's there, I think, solely in the film, it appears, to be on camera. She is there because she likes his fame. She started companies under his name now, trading sort of with his image. So, and there's something perhaps it's just American sort of reality TV making young men and women feel like they have to act like this, but she seemed very sort of artificial. And I sort of like the idea that maybe she's got a new husband, Carole Baskin, or a new partner who knows about the history and has come on board, and you're not sure about his motivation. So the entire thing.
Well, you mean a lot after the guy in Tiger King? So the guy in Tiger King is not the husband that she's been suspected of murdering. He's quite a figure in himself, right? He's quite scared of him. He seems he's like a very knowledgeable law guy. He knows all the laws, but he's one of those really seems very kind, saying lots of kind words, but they just don't register in his eyes. You know what I mean? And
that's perfect anyway. I hadn't seen enough of Tiger King to qualify, so I guess so that's perfect already.
And he knows all the past.
Yeah.
And he knows all the players. So, but that actually brought up, I thought about it. What happens if during the filming of either the film or the series, he dies?
Yeah, he dies.
Not killed, he just dies. Yeah. And maybe it's after he's filmed a section where he says something that could be taken either way.
Yeah. He reveals some sort of secret and she's really mad about it, and then,
and it's on film and then he disappears. So yeah, that's my honest woman. Hey there, cats and kittens.
So we had two fantastic ideas, one from Dan, one from Ollie. Thanks for that, guys. And before we hear Ryan, the Dupe's idea for an honest woman, I'll let you guys know what will be happening at the end of this episode. I'll be picking a winner. The winner will be going into a pool, and we'll be organising from that a way of the public voting, so you guys can vote on your eventual winner. Now, what will happen with that winner, the winning idea over the entire series, is we'll make it into a trailer. We'll pop it up onto YouTube, and you can see us in all of our glory, trying to desperately recreate with our limited resources the idea that someone has pitched effectively at random based on one of our titles from one of our episodes. So I don't want anyone to feel discouraged if they don't win. As I say at the end of all of these segments, the winner of this episode today is really the loser, because they increased their chance of having it made into a trailer and immortalized probably forever. Probably they'll be putting it on the next spaceship that goes to the moon, and they'll plant it down there in a time capsule. So I think it's I've got an idea for an honest woman that I made up 5 minutes before we started, and I don't think it's very good. So I'll just go over it briefly. But first, I'd like to hear the idea from our dupe, Ryan, who's been thinking this whole time whilst we've been chatting about his idea for an honest woman.
Thank you very much, Sean. So, an honest woman, another tough one. We've had a good couple of run of quite tough titles to sort of roll with in this time. And I thought of an honest woman, and the first thing that came to mind was a reimagining, in a way, of The Usual Suspects.
That's
so
good.
What I've got is the FBI raid a stockbrokers in the middle of a big city, probably New York. Again, I've done a couple of New York ones now. And, they get in there because these traders, they're sort of being investigated for insider trading. And you have a bunch of establishing at the beginning of them going through, getting all the computers. The big boss, they can't see him anywhere, he's not there. And they start to talk to a lot of the other traders. A couple of guys are like sweating it out. They get broken. They get sort of done what they're done. They're all with their legal representation. Mm-hmm. And then in walks Sandra Bullock.
Mm-hmm.
And she...
Yes. Sorry, I've got to stop you there. I'm sold.
So in walks Sandra Bullock, and she's not a partner of this sort of stockbroker firm, but she's up there, she walks in and she's the next one to be interviewed. And the interviewer, the FBI agent doing all the interviewing, is Mahershala Ali.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So he sort of probably be the department of the FBI that deals
probably most well known for Alita Battle Angel, I expect.
Yes,
most people will know him from that and nothing else.
And being the father in Madden in the career mode. So I like the idea of her. She's coming in and she's dressed like immaculately. Mm-hmm. She's not like worried about anything. She walks into the room, she sits down, and she gets asked questions, and she sort of has this like smarminess about her. Mm-hmm. And she's got, she hasn't got any legal representation. She's there by herself. She has volunteered her computer. Everything is like perfectly filed. And I think Mahershala starts commenting on this. Everything's perfect. You have to be organized. She's given all of these files. Everything's dated. Everything's noted. Everything's there. Mm-hmm. And so, you're sort of wondering. But
that's already suspicious, right?
Right, but here's the thing. So she has an answer for everything, for absolutely everything. And it's not like she's not sweating at all, She's given just the right, perfect answer for everything. And I think that's where it sort of has this idea, because, we're sort of told, FBI agents are told, to don't trust anything, look beyond, someone's hiding something. So the fact that she's volunteering everything, she's like, did they come to her house and she lets them in and she's got tea for them, and they're going through the files and she's talking to Mahershala Ali and like they're looking at, she's got stuff, her house is beautiful. She's got stuff like she's got a photo with the senator that they're sort of talking about that the insider trading has been like filtered down from that. And he's like, well, why have you got a photo? And she's like, we're at a charity gala, and those sort of things are tax havens, aren't they? And which like, we know to be true, but by what she's saying, she's not actually breaking any laws or anything like that. And I love this idea of it, like this big game of cat and mouse. They start following her, her routines are clean. She does the things she said she does. Everything that they start running cross references about it. Everyone's really nice about her, which, and they start to ask like, why aren't you a partner? And she's saying, well, this is a man's game. I've got to play it. And to be able to play it, I need to be organized. I need to know these people. The fact that I know, I don't know, this like big senator, they look into her background. She's like Harvard Law. So she's very smart. Why did you go into stockbroking? Because, the law isn't going to get you anywhere. I'm not going to make it up to her, but I can make a shit ton of cash being a stockbroker because I know how to do that. So
she just says something about the American dream and about how she's got kids and they're more important, so she has to put aside.
Well, I don't think she does. I don't think she has.
She doesn't have any connections.
And that's another thing where they're like, why aren't you married? Why haven't you got kids? And it's like, I don't need to. I'm happy doing what I do, and I'm really, really good at what I do. You've got all of my paperwork in front of you. You can see that. I'm making like X million a year. How much are you making? Can you say you're really truly happy and you're really truly that good at what you do? So she starts to sort of get into his head a little bit.
Okay.
And everything that she knows people, like she was in sororities with people, so she's got all those connections, which might seem like she's acquired them sort of like sneakily or something like that. And I just love this idea, this big game of cat and mouse between them all.
And the FBI agent, unless you have a suggestion, it probably should be Edward Norton. I'm just getting...
I said Mahershala Ali.
Oh, of course you did. Sorry. Yeah, cut out my me sounding like an idiot. Yeah, Mahershala Ali, good choice.
Thank you. And it's big, and everything. And every time you think he's going back over the paperwork and saying like, have you checked this? And they cross-reference with her assistant. And they, and everything. And he thinks he's got a lead, and he chases up, and he goes like meet someone in a dive bar or follow someone. And like it all, like the whole direction of this film is it makes everything look like it's suspicious. And we, the audience, we're looking as Dan said straight away when I was talking to her about her being volunteering, given that information, instantly we're like, someone's up with this.
Yeah, sure.
Someone's up with this person. Sure. Or does it mean that she is just an honest woman, and she is like, she has done all of her meticulous paperwork.
So the twist is that there's absolutely nothing wrong. She's had absolutely nothing to do with it, and she is just an honest woman.
I think that the investigation will go, but we'll keep having that feeling of like, she is the antagonist. She is the antagonist. She is. We're going to find her. We're going to get her. Something's going to break. Something's going to be missed. Like that sort of like hungry, almost trying to, but like not trying to put an answer in front of someone that will slip them up. Or maybe they do. Maybe they try and fabricate something, and then she's like, well, that's completely not true because of X, Y, and Z, or this person's, you said that the neighbour saw me, but the neighbour's been dead for 15 years. So I couldn't have been at that lake house. You've just played your hand, actually, which means you've got nothing on me.
Yeah. Sure.
And doing that sort of like...
What if she's got all of this stuff out here and she's deliberately giving it out, and she's hoping that the FBI agents are clever enough to see the actual evidence in there that accuses someone else in the company that she can't speak out for because she wouldn't grasp any of her. She's loyal to the company, but she's leaving just enough breadcrumbs by being only honest that anyone intelligent enough can see through all of that to get, and that's the end. The ending is that they've been doing all this red wire stuff to try and red wall to work it out, and it actually leads them down one other path, and it's someone completely different. And so they've been antagonizing the entire way through.
The FBI agent's own chief or something, So like, because if you said Usual Suspects, my first thought is there's going to be a big twist at the end, right?
I've written what I'd like the ending to be, and actually Dan at work. So I'll tell you what the ending is, and we can work it around both. So I like the idea of the case gets closed or it gets dropped or whatever. They find somebody, right? But the guy is and as soon as they find some person and they pin it, almost like a scapegoat is what I'm looking for. But he's so not okay with it, and then he goes to he's like, where is Sandra Bullock's character, and she's like on her way to the airport. She's got a ticket. They check her accounts. She's got a ticket to a non-extradition country, and so they're at the end. They're at the airport, and she's sitting there waiting to go. And he chats to her, and they sort of have that moment in the heat, where they talk at the table. It's like that in the airport, in those airport seats waiting for a flight. Yeah, and she sort of says you know what? let's say you're right. Let's say because I know Bill, the senator, and this, that, and the other, and I did do this, and I was here for this, and I was here for that, and she like basically connects all those dots for him, and then goes
solves his own case for
him,
him.
and then laughs about it, and she's like, well, maybe I just want to go on a holiday in the sun,
and then gets on the plane and goes,
and then that's the sort of moment where you're like, shit, was she actually the whole time? Was she actually the one? And her note keeping was so meticulous that it was forged, or is she just
not
an
even
honest
that?
woman?
Just that part. The idea of a part. That's a really good twist. The idea of the parlor scene being that she reveals to the Sherlock Holmes what could have actually happened in such detail that it connects all the dots from the entire rest of the movie. But she hasn't lied at any point.
No.
And then, but because he's not there in a capacity to arrest her, because it doesn't work like that, like it does in the movies. He can't just arrest her because she told him that it sounds like a plausible thing. He can't arrest her. He has to allow her to get on the plane. And I think that's a really good idea.
And it's to a non-extradition country, so like, and that's sort of said by like the analyst. Oh, it's to like a non-extradition country, and that's another that instantly it's a red flag for all of us. And all of us watching, going, oh shit, she's the evil, but. I thought that's a really good. It's like a nice thriller. It's like a bit of it's a crime thriller sort of, and off the vein of the fact that Wolf of Wall Street did so well, and I think we're sort of due. I haven't seen a film that's had like a decent twist on me since like Inside Man, and obviously The Usual Suspects when it came out. That was like. For loads of people.
So I think you can go experimental with it, and it could be a Steven Soderbergh type film, because he did do Out of Sight, which is a great sort of example of sort of, I don't know, character and dialogue whilst being stylistic and hardboard, but also not being too sort of cliche. You could go is it Ivan Reitman? No, Jason Reitman, because I liked how with The Front Runner, he sort of took that almost like 70s paranoia approach where people talk over each other. It's not recorded with clear sound, and there's a roving camera which moves around, so you're not quite sure who you're supposed to be paying attention to. So you can have that sort of vibe to it if you wanted to as well. Or you could go sort of get Christopher McQuarrie down and say, right, you wrote The Usual Suspects, you're doing well with 6 million Mission Impossible films. Why don't you do your return to form, your unofficial sequel to The Usual Suspects? And, McQuarrie could handle it, make it a bit more of a sort of classical Hollywood picture maybe or something. I don't know. It's got
that. I mean, I was going to say originally, because it would be excellently conversational. I was going to say Aaron Sorkin, but I don't think that's the right kind of dialogue for this.
It's too much. Too much.
Yeah. And so I thought, actually he's not right. So yeah, Soderbergh's a good sort of. I'm going to try. I'm going to throw my boy Fincher a bone at this one. He ain't going to take it, I'm going to throw it to him first.
Although this is exactly the sort of film he would take, isn't it? Because there is that element of he loves
because it's high society and like a darkness. It's not. Is it Narc that the whole film, the main characters, everything's shot. He's blue, right? Everything to do with the main character is blue. Use a lot of color for that.
Yeah, sure.
So that sort of idea between like an interesting contrast in like light and sort of the way that the way that she dresses. She dresses in white quite a lot, which obviously we perceive as quite a pure color. Rather than sort of darks and reds and blacks, which antagonists.
No, I like that. And also Fincher has quite an acerbic style. He's quite sort of fond of saying that he wants his films to be shot as if a human hasn't operated the camera. It's almost like a robot is operating, like something very sort of alien is watching this. Not watching in a voyeuristic verite documentary way, but watching from a very clinical sort of standpoint. And I can see the movie being very tense by showing you everything in a clinical fashion. There's lots of clinical rooms, sterile clinical rooms that people do.
And it's the things that are said that make us, you might not necessarily get Maréchal Ali's reaction, but we're screaming at the TV. We're screaming at the TV, Oh, what did she just say? Oh, yeah, they are a tax haven. If you do your research, charity galas are. It
plays with your expectations of when characters in movies say suspicious things.
Absolutely.
Like you're supposed to hear it as an audience, but you're not supposed to hear it as a character. But whereas in this time, it's almost the other way around.
And we've had so many of those occasions where you've asked someone a question and you're like, really? And they are, absolutely telling the truth to you, and you just sort of don't want to believe the answer is right from them. And they could be telling the truth of this. So, going back to Ollie's original idea, you start to build those conspiracy theories, right? And you start to try and put those strings together, and rehearsing can sometimes be like quite negative on somebody. And we do it a lot when we watch films, but that's only because it's an hour and a half or 2 hours and it's a fantasy written up by somebody. So we're allowed to come up with conspiracy theories and create ideas for them because it's not real life to us.
Now, the thing is, that's a great idea. Part of me would kill to see an actual Usual Suspect sequel. I was hoping it would be like 4 or 5 women in a cell, and then it starts like that.
I did originally write,
but then I guess that's Widows, isn't it? I mean, I know Widows is a very different film, but if I thought of a spiritual sequel to Usual Suspects, although there's not a twist, I don't think the twist is integral to Usual Suspects, but I think the audience shouldn't expect a twist. But Widows is very much a spiritual successor to Usual Suspects, I think, in tone.
Well, one of the things I wrote down, original idea was like an art gallery, something stolen at an art gallery, and then they have to interview the people that are there. And out of those 5 people, one of them is an honest woman, right? And it's that sort of. And then I thought, actually, I talked about arts and heists and stuff like that before, and sort of I like this. That's why I sort of went with the stockbroking, sort of the insider trading aspect of it. And you almost forget that that's the first reason why they went in there. It's obviously interwoven in the whole story, but it's now it doesn't become about this firm doing insider trading and where's the big boss gone. He wasn't there at the time of the raid. It's actually like just boils down to the relationship of those two.
So trailer, poster, just end on giving us those vibes. What are we seeing?
I like a poster that's split down the middle. One half is they're both the characters sitting at their desks. Marshall Elliot his with all of his paperwork and sort of this tiny cubicle office at the thingy, and her in this like
this old computer and lots of paperwork as opposed to digital, and
and her
a terrible backdrop behind him out of the window,
or motivational cat poster in the back, that sort of thing, calendar, and hers would be like out view New York, like perfect, like amazing desk. You might even have it so it's split like halfway down their person, so it's like one half of each person, and hers is like perfect. Thingy.
I like that, like almost like they're playing battleships, like their computers are against each other and then they're both facing each other on their seats.
I like that.
Something like that sort of framing.
Like beautifully clean office versus like a high society office versus this sort of thing. Maybe I'm trying to think of like it's maybe a little too out there, but like a pair of handcuffs made out of dollar bills. But then that sort of thingy, or like I don't really know, it's a bit of a tough. I think that first poster idea is really good. I think it's heralded. It doesn't win any awards, right? It's one of those films that it gets nominated because powerhouse actors, great storyline, great directing, it's like the critics' choice, but it doesn't go in for like the award ceremony. It's not an Oscar winner, it's not a Golden Globes winner, a BAFTA winner. A Most Violent Year with Oscar Isaac's in it, it was, people really loved it, but it didn't win any Oscars and everything like that. But yeah,
it won one Oscar, didn't it? The Oscar Isaac.
Oh, that's terrible.
This is a good one. This is a good episode of bad jokes.
Awful.
It's the lockdown. It's the lockdown, man. I have more decorum than this usually.
I thought I'd been like, oh no, I didn't win the Oscars, and I was like, no. No, I really love this. I haven't seen a sort of really good thriller film that's kept me on the edge of my seat and made me genuinely question whether they got it right or whether I was the one that got it right.
Well, thanks for that. So we've had 3 pretty diverse and fantastic ideas, all from the title, An Honest Woman. We've had Ollie's Aronofsky Del Toro mixture, sort of starts as a romance and then gives you the old Hitchcock bait and switch and takes you from this romance to a sort of gothic allegorical fantasy film, which is the new genre that we've created, with taking the man out of the picture and really pushing these 2 women characters to the forefront and dealing with some heady topics whilst also playing around with whether the folklore and the monsters and all sorts of weirdness, whether it's present or whether it's just in the minds of the characters. We had Dan's docu-film series, which we've never had in Slash Shoot before, this sort of idea of somebody taking the way they were portrayed in the media and putting their own money into financing a rebuttal, using real actors and real characters and based on Netflix's favorite darling Tiger King. And our first title we've had a colon in. So if that's not a reason to perhaps put it through as a winner, I don't know what is. But and then we've had Ryan's Dupe, the Dupe's idea of this what begins as maybe this Usual Suspects type interrogation thriller ends with this twist where you're never quite sure whether the FBI agent who's been hunting this through this honest, perfect woman's records and details and life, her whole life, whether it's a fabrication or whether it is in fact this sort of dark, nefarious thing with a wonderful twist ending. So with that in mind, I'd just like to talk everybody's ideas up before I speak about mine, because I just want them to hold on to something when they're listening to it. I was in a quandary about An Honest Woman. I love the idea of the title, but I wasn't quite sure where I could take it at all. But then I thought of a genre or a subgenre that I don't normally get to see very often. And I love confidence films. You know, it used to be called the con man film, but I imagine particularly in this case, the confidence film is probably the best reference. Now, there's a lot of modern confidence films. There's the one with Viggo Mortensen in it. There's Focus with Margot Robbie and Will Smith in it. But I like something that has more of an old school film noir vibe, and I like confidence films as a sort of subgenre of film noir, and I'd like to see one with. This is how the idea started. I'll go through some of my ideas, and you'll see how it changes. Because at first I was like, well, I like the idea of having a confidence film with a woman as a star, and not playing second fiddle or playing the femme fatale, but as the main character. You can go with sort of old school Clute or even the Spanish Prisoner or Grifters sort of vibe if you're going for a sort of slightly more sort of old school con film. Or you could go new age. You could go something like Matchstick Men or Ocean's 11, something a bit more vibrant. But the one core thing is I wanted it to shift. So what I loved about The Brothers Bloom, and what actually I found, and I've already mentioned this in the podcast before, actually, The Brothers Bloom, but what I liked about it was that it says it's a con man film, and then it ends, the con is really that it's a film about two brothers. It's a film about relationships and love. And it's in doing so, it sort of eschews the idea of a con man film, that it's like film noir. They get their comeuppance and they get, you know, beaten down, and they never get back up again, which is basically what most con films are about. So it's the complete opposite of that. So that was what I was holding on to, this idea of that I wanted it to be dark, but I wanted there to be a twist. So with the idea of An Honest Woman, which of course and I did, which I don't normally do this isn't my style, but I Googled it, and the Merriam-Webster dictionary says it's old-fashioned and humorous, because I wanted to see where it fell currently, the phrase An Honest Woman. But apparently old-fashioned plus humorous is where it lies. So perhaps it's been sort of retconned as something not too nefarious. And it's to marry a woman, especially a woman that one has already had sex with. Go on, Ollie.
You took the words out of my mouth. I did exactly the same thing as you when I began this journey, and I wanted to say that element was actually a surprise to me.
To make an honest woman of you, isn't it? And that in itself is so unbelievably archaic. Like marrying you is going to make you honest. Everything else before is deceit. And only for women.
You've already had sex with them. You know, you've already had sex with them, so you have to then make them honest. It's like they're dishonest in some way. Yeah. So. Yeah.
But not you.
yeah, absolutely.
Lads.
We really should have got a woman on for this episode. But yeah, so of course that also then led me directly to think about, I did not want, as you often find with femme fatales or the female characters in con man films or film noir, that they use sex, or in this case possibly marriage, as part of their being or part of the plot. And I didn't want her to use her sexuality and status as a status thing, or to gain a foothold in anything. So, because it's a grey area, isn't it? You know, is a woman using her sexuality in a movie empowering, or is it male gaze? You know, what sort of, where does it fall? So I thought, okay, so the plot has to revolve around marriage and sex, but she doesn't. You know, her being is not necessarily that's what she focuses on. And then I thought, okay, I've got it. I don't know enough about this part of the world or about this world, to be fair, so I'm happy to be corrected. That's why I'm going to say this very short and sweet. But I think that she's this. She's a Saudi woman. It's set in Dubai, and it's a film with an empowered female Muslim woman. Starts as a confidence woman, doing sort of whatever she can to survive, and big cons, small cons. It's that sort of approach to the film, set in the glitz and glamour of Dubai, that then shifts halfway through to become something where she is sort of, I don't know, embroiled into, or her character is such that she uses her skills to free the enslaved and the downtrodden in that part of the world. So there is something illicit under the glossy world of Dubai, and this seedy underworld, but she has to navigate it as a Muslim woman. And I thought it would be fascinating to have a Muslim woman writer and director. Hopefully, it would be the sort of story that, sometimes these writers of sort of ethnic sort of descent, they make films they make genre films, but they imbue them with the spirit and character of maybe what it was like for them to grow up, or their parents' stories, and so that gives it more flavor. So they take the framework of Hollywood and they imbue it with their own sort of experiences. So it's this sort of dual film, and it sort of mimics maybe Bill Friedkin's work from the 70s, or maybe Paul Schrader's work from that sort of time period. And it starts as this hip, fun confidence film, and then shifts into something where actually she has to use her abilities for good and to actually do something important. And it's a bit more of a sort of hard-boiled film noir towards the end, but maybe with this confidence thread woven through it.
Can I make a suggestion? If you're looking at doing in Dubai, when the Burj Khalifa was being built, which is the world's tallest building, there were sort of stories about slave labour is not exactly the right term, but the phrase like use modern slavery. Sort of you see that in a lot of companies, in the way that in the sort of terms and conditions. But there are people who have said, like, I was sat in a crane for 2 weeks. And because I was working so much, because I couldn't get down because it took me so long to get down. So that was the sort of, maybe there is something, and that's, I guess, what we see from the news that gets leaked out of there. So you're right. I think that
it coincides with. Sorry to cut you off, but it coincides with the birthplace of Dubai as a sort of economic and a tourist hub, so it's maybe it's at that point.
Not LA. Las Vegas obviously has such a big connotation with the mob and stuff like that. So maybe and obviously Ocean's 11. The Ocean's films obviously being set there. So having that as a sort of that the imagining of that in Dubai, but
there's nothing to imagine that there is any less corruption in that part of the world, or in that sort of that sort of area.
Sean, I'm very intrigued in this idea about how you become a confidence woman in a society like that. Like, there to me is a fascinating story of, like, in general, women probably in that society are not free to choose their lives, particularly in organized crime. So if you are a woman, how do you do it?
Thanks, Ollie, for that question. You're getting me back for the doctor comment from earlier on. Ryan, I think you want to answer this question, don't you?
Well, I just so I've seen a lot of imagery of like women-only areas in Dubai, and not just Dubai, across
part of the world,
across that part of the world, and it is a sort of this idea of there are like, I don't know if you want to use the word congregation, but there are times where women can get together and talk, and I think maybe the idea of she becomes a confidence woman by pulling the right strings with the right people, with the right women who are like good with their men. So the idea of sort of like a man being sort of the way he is in the boardroom, but when he comes back home, it's like he's very respectful to his wife, and that's the woman that she pulls on, because she sort of has a bit more sway over some of the more bullish men.
Is it archaic to assume that in certain more archaic cultures, that then we can cut this out if there's a fine line I'm writing, that is it fair to say that a lot of women in these cultures run the households? They sort of, I know that I can speak for my grandparents, who are Anglo-Indian, I can speak to the fact that my nan ran the household.
Yeah, that's true.
And my granddad went off and worked, and he came home and he said, "Right, here's everything, my bank accounts, here's everything else. I don't know what I'm doing, you know." And he didn't do it. I mean, he was a lovely man. He didn't do it out of laziness. He did it because I don't really know why that it fell like that. Actually, I'm not going to speculate, but my nan, and to this day, is sharp as a button, and she was fantastic at those sorts of things. So, is it possible to imagine that you are already set up with some of those tools if you are that role in a household? So possibly also the element of concealment, and I have to be careful with, just because I don't know much about any faith, to be honest with you, but the idea of concealment is part of the Muslim faith for a variety of reasons. And you can use, I presume that anything that you decide to, if it's your choice, for example, to be part of that structure, you can use it to your advantage. So I feel like the element of being concealed perhaps can be used to someone's advantage, whether they were whether it was pressed upon them societally or culturally, or whether it was their choice. You can sort of perhaps use those tools. Is that a good enough answer for you, Ollie? I don't know. Do you mean the actual mechanics of how that works? I think it's a little bit more communal. I think that women, particularly, I think that women are sort of notoriously more sort of social in that aspect, that men are a little bit more guarded, and particularly, so I think that that's why confidence men in movies, they're always singular characters with maybe one mentor that's probably stabbed them in the back, or, you know, they probably have a spurious relationship with, or will stab them in the back. So you can birth these confidence women by them actually supporting each other, and they eventually become more than the sum of their parts, maybe.
So are they a group? Is she part of a group of women who are involved in this?
I think it would start, or her beginnings would be as part of a group. Yeah. Okay. I think if you were to sort of examine or show in the film somewhere her beginnings, because maybe, I mean, a lot of film noir and confidence films, they take place over a short period of time, but I kind of like the idea of using the Burj Khalifa as the passage of time. So the film starts perhaps when the Burj Khalifa is being developed, and it ends when it's completed. So over this long period of time, you're able to see her grow and change in this society that's growing and changing, and her role growing and changing, and you get to see her go from, perhaps there is a group of women that sort of start to trade on their ability or that concealed nature of themselves, or their other powers that they have. And then, but then I think the film is very solely based on her, and it's a very singular sort of film to give her the limelight. It's not an ensemble film, and I think it would definitely focus on her. But perhaps her origins would have come from a group, yeah. And you'd learn slightly differently, wouldn't you? It's not like you're learning this sort of stuff from, I don't know, a lot of confidence men and women in America. I suppose it's almost built on American movies. It's like that. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy with Hollywood and life imitating art and art imitating life. It's a very unusual thing. What would it be like out there in that part of the world? It is a good question. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see culturally why that might have been placed into, moved from culture into, I don't know, into a necessity for these people. I don't know. I think I'm talking rubbish now. But
yes, this really reminds me of Uncut Gems, where you have this kind of world that's just created where it feels so fully formed, but completely different to, I don't know, this world of people sharing gems and whatever. And the whole thing is a huge confidence operation where I don't know if you guys have seen it, but
no, it's on my list.
Okay,
but no spoilers.
Okay, it's kind of hard to talk about without,
I just know my old housemate said he just didn't feel comfortable the entire time. Like,
I've heard it's a panic attack in the film. Yeah, but no, from knowing the directors, the Sadfi brothers, and knowing also seeing the trailers and some of the feedback, I can see what you're saying. It's like the self-contained world that's fully formed. There's nothing to do with anything in your frame of reference, but it's so fully fleshed out that you almost sort of understand it in that sort of 90 minutes or whatever. It was extremely hard for me to pick a winner today. Really genuinely hard. Normally it's difficult, but there's a clear winner, and the hardest thing is trying to find out how I let down everybody else. But
how you let Dan down.
Dan down every time without fail.
Put that on a t-shirt.
Dan, what was your hashtag?
Hashtag Dan was robbed.
Hashtag Dan was robbed. But I'm going to do something that I've never done before because it's my show and I make the rules. And I'm going to say, and I'm just going to say it outright instead of the preamble that gets everybody else's hopes up. I'm going to make Ryan and Ollie joint winners. And that's not just to irritate
Hashtag
Dan.
Dan was robbed. But what you could have said, and also I kind of like my own one as well. So I think we'll put all three in the pot.
Yeah. Cool, in fact, just to be fair on everyone, I've picked my own. Yeah. And it's not because doing a Carole Baskin sequel would be incredibly difficult for us to do, especially if it's got 5 meta layers to it and everything. It's not that. I mean, their idea was brilliant. And there is more of a market for it than any of the other ideas, arguably, particularly during the lockdown. But I think Ollie's idea being so incredibly fleshed out, plus in a sort of, I don't know, this sort of meeting of Aronofsky and Del Toro, I love it. You know, it's something I haven't seen before. I've seen lots of Del Toro and lots of Aronofsky, and I haven't found this sort of film that can encapsulate both of these things. I love that it comes from your academic background, that it has your sort of your interest in history and in sort of society, but then it also has a serpent in it and a woman that turns into a fairy. And you know, I love that. I love it. It's fantastic, and it's the idea that I would like to make the most. So there's no way I couldn't pick it. It's the idea that I would want to someone, you know, it's not my choice who wins, but someone picks it to win, and we get to make that awesome sort of European folkloric sort of allegorical film. So for that reason, I'm going to pick it because it's the one I would like to make the most. And Ryan's idea just came out fully formed, didn't it? Came out fully formed, and that's not always the case with the Dupe because it's you know, it sometimes requires some collaboration, but it came out fully formed. The twist was solid. I can see it as a movie. I can see it. Whereas the beauty in Ollie's is finding it. You know, it's one of these things that's the beauty is as you're creating it, finding that, you know, how it works and its perfect form. And the beauty of Ryan's idea for An Honest Woman is that it comes out fully formed. You can see it all, and it's made to order, and it's ready.
Yeah, I want to say, I think based on the amount of time Ryan had to prepare his idea and the amount of time I had to prepare my idea, in terms of productivity, he's the absolute winner.
Thank you.
And who doesn't want to be winner on the basis of productivity?
And Ollie, I would say
Ryan does. Ryan loves that.
Yeah, he does.
And Ollie, I'd say that your idea, because you had 3 months to come up with it, you know, it had this real nice sharpness to it, that everything that you laid out in front of us, you know, you'd research, you know, you had the names of the people of the folklore, and you had this beautiful idea. So I'd say that's the winner for me.
There's room for research, isn't there? There's room for someone to go off and find out about these sort of folklore characters, and for Dan to go off and research it. Yeah. Maybe take a hint, Dan. You know, maybe. No, I'm joking. I love your idea, mate. But if I didn't snub you every time, we wouldn't start a hashtag going, would we? You know
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
We're also gonna have to find a new editor.
Yeah, that's true. Your producer.
I'll just edit it out so I win every. You don't know.
That's true.
I edit it so I win every week.
Of course. I mean, I don't review these. Do you know what I mean?
Well and done.
So yeah, please like and subscribe. I mean, we you know, or follow, or whatever system you use. I mean, I know these things got to Google Podcasts now because that's hit the UK, I believe, as well on non-Android devices. We've got it. We use Anchor, and so you can listen to it on Anchor if you don't want to sign up for anything. But if you've got a Spotify or an Apple account, it shoots off to all those things. We've got several other episodes. We've recorded a few during the lockdown as well, so you'll you know, be part of the journey with us as the format sort of moves and shifts around. We've got a Reddit for you to tell us, you know, if you think one or more of the ideas wins out over Ollie and Ryan today. Give us your opinion. We have a Facebook page. Also, I mean, everything. I mean, you know how it works. Every type of social media. If we don't have it, then tell us to make it, and we'll make it. But we basically have every type of social media except Snapchat.
TikTok.
And TikTok,
TikTok,
because quite frankly, including Ryan, we're all too old for TikTok. I'll be honest with you. It's not for us, all right? And if you're our age or older, it's not for you either, all right? I'll be honest with you. But yeah, so, but do you know what would really help us? It's sharing it. Sharing it would help us because we're really privileged to be getting some really great feedback from our community and from people we know and from people they know. But being able to spread it outside of our community would really help us out. So that would be one of the things that we would love if you guys enjoy it for you to be able to do.
Well, yeah, you guys have picked a series of films that I have not actually seen before as cultural reference points. So at least with The Usual Suspects, I was trying to reverse engineer it through with the episode of Community, which is a parody of The Usual Suspects. I'm trying to see, can I work out what the original story of the film was?
Yeah.
Well, actually, with each episode, Ollie, I actually create a curated list, like chronologically, of the actors and the films that we reference. So, listeners at home, if you don't know the films that we're sort of referencing, follow those lists.
We'll chuck it in the description block at the bottom.
Put it in the description block of every single episode of what we do, and you'll be able to follow along with all the references we make, and dive down a little bit of an IMDb rabbit hole yourself.
Yeah. And thanks for that, Ryan. And it just leaves me to thank you, Ryan the Dupe, for your efforts today.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ollie.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you, everyone at home, for listening. Cheers. No, that's not a good start. Hold on. Do not put that noise at the end of the episode. Hold on. Wait. Okay.
Recorded in the Capo Studios, 2020. What's up, danger?
We thought there was something seriously wrong the first time we did this.
So we know it's 48 then in the future.
What you're hearing is probably how I actually sound to other people. That's my fear, is that this is what I actually sound like.